I'll remove that nameplate because that sticks up proud of the top there. I'll try a hose clip. Well, that won't do it because of the way these clips are shaped. These sides protrude down too far. I only have perhaps a millimetre or so of edge there available to grab onto, so that won't do it for me, unfortunately. And I don't know that I've got one of these clamps that will clamp on there well enough, or it doesn't want to go on. It's not really the right size. I could make a spanner that'll fit that. I've got some aluminium spanners that I've made. I could make another spanner like this. This one will not stretch out far enough to go on there, nor will it close up enough to get onto that inner edge. So that's a possibility, is to make another clamp like that to get onto it. There's a dirty mark there, but it looks more like paint than anything else. So what I'm looking for, of course, are scratches or marks that would indicate that somebody's had a go at doing this with a tool in the past and given up. But I'm not seeing it. If I open it up from the back, I can remove the case and the shutter blades. The diaphragm's pretty sticky. I suppose that's hardly surprising. I'm looking down the sides of that front lens group there, seeing if I can see clear space that I could dribble a little bit of solvent down into. I think I can get in from the back. This is not the preferred method of opening shutters. That's the case off. I'm going to remove the shutter blades. I'm going to number which blade goes. That's 1. This is blade 2. This is blade 3. I might have been over optimistic. I'm not seeing as much space down there now as I thought I was going to get. No, I can't see it. Oh, I can see a hole here and a hole here where I could engage a tool. If I had a suitably buggered up pair of tweezers, I might get to that. They're not in a straight line, unfortunately, from the edge. I'm going to have to mutilate a pair of tweezers so they'll hook in there. Of course, I don't know that these will be strong enough to do the job anyway. Well, they do hook in there. Alright. That's got the potential to work. I'm going to put a dribble of solvent down the side of that and then modify these a bit further and have a go. My first task this morning is to make another tool like this to fit this lens. It's 27mm diameter I need. This one here is somewhat smaller than that. I don't even remember what I'd made that to fit, but it would have been certainly to do the same sort of task. As you can see from the edge there, there's very little width to that edge. I really do have to get a tool like this right down and snug against the case in order to get that lens loose, which is why removing the nameplate here was the first thing I did, so that I have no obstructions. So I've got to go down to the shed, find another piece of this aluminium. It was a 50mm or 2-inch wide strip, an 8mm thick or 3mm, an eighth of an inch thick, about 3mm. And my first task will be to knock a hole in it. Typically I just use a hole saw to do that job because hole saws are very good at doing that thing. And a hole saw, I'm never going to find one that's exactly the right size, unfortunately, so it'll be a 1-inch hole saw, no doubt, which is nominally 25.4mm. And then the boring head to bore that hole to size. Then I'll have to mark it and cut the slot here. I can cut that slot with a milling cutter, and any other shaping I need to do, well, that's going to have to be like round here. That's going to have to be done with a hacksaw and files, because I don't have a lot of sophisticated equipment. Well, I'm just back for a first fitting, you might say. Just checking that it does actually fit. I have to stretch it slightly to get it on. That's ideal. That means it'll grip nicely. As you can see, I've got a little bit more tidying up to do here, which I'll go and do. Take off all the rough edges and then come back. Well, I've got the tool made. Of course, I need a handy way to hold this body here, because at the moment I've got a spring sticking out the side and vulnerable levers and things. I'll see if I can put the case back on there, which means getting that spring to hook back into the case there. I'll put the case back on, and then I've got something to grip the shutter by. And then hopefully my clever new lever, my clever new spanner will grip that lens, and it'll unscrew from the front of the lens tube there. That's the theory. We'll have to see how it turns out in practice. There's my spanner on there, it's fitting well. Yep, no problem at all. No trouble. Being able to get a grip on that lens was all that was required. The actual force involved in unscrewing it was not particularly bad at all. Now there's some lacquer or some crap here, yeah. I don't know whether that is the paint. That paint has come adrift as a result of me squirting some solvent down there. I think we could say it probably had. But that certainly wasn't going to let go in a hurry. So there it is. I've got that lens out now and I can carry on with my shutter repair. And there's another look at the spanner. And to make this, I just took the aluminium, which was 2" by 8 or 50 by 3, I'm not sure which, I didn't bother to measure it. Used a hole saw to knock a hole in here. I didn't have a 1" hole saw, I had a 7/8 hole saw, so I had to use that. I used a boring head on the mill drill to cut this out to a neat 27. I cut my slot through there with a 6mm milling cutter, and as you can see I've done minimal amount of rounding this off with a file and a hacksaw and polished it up a little bit, and that's all that was required. So you could do that without a milling machine. If you could get a hole saw that was very close to the size you wanted, you'd get away with that. Right, now I need to carry on doing this shutter. Of course, in this case I've already been into the shutter from the back, but normally I would start here with that lock screw, then unbayonet that mount at the front. Is it going to come off for us? Yeah, I think so. Oh, it looks like it's lined up. Yeah, it's just sticky. Like everything else on this camera, it's sticky. There we go. Now we're into the shutter. This is the mechanism plate. Normally your next thing is to disconnect the spring, the main drive spring, from the main lever, which is this piece. None of this stuff wants to move easily. It's sticky as. This little catch holds the shutter cocked. I'm holding the shutter lever down so I've got access to this screw, which on this camera is where a release plunger would fit. Or a cable release in other cases. So with that out the way, I can unhook this piece. That's the lever that operates from the cable release socket. It also has the return spring for the shutter release button. This is the high speed spring, 500th of a second spring. Now I can lift off my shutter release button. It's got a very fine spring on the back, but got to be careful of that. Careful not to damage it. Here we have the B and T levers. This one can come off. It's got a little brass bush on it which fits on top of the lever. It doesn't go under the lever. The lever has a spring attached. That lever you can usually leave on there without any problem at all. This is all quite sticky. The retard gear train is not particularly enthusiastic about moving. So from the back, at this stage normally you'd be splitting it at the back, and it would expose the shutter blades, but of course in this case I've already had them off so that they didn't get damaged in the fight to get the lens from the front of the camera, front of the shutter. They can come out. So there's our mechanism plate. I want to strip this down further. These two screws here, which are squared off, normally you can turn those with a pair of tweezers. They're a bit reluctant. They're very reluctant. I will have to find another way of dealing with that. Normally you can just unscrew those with the flats of the insides of your tweezers. So I want that off. That's the blade actuating ring. It's doubtless quite sticky. The lever from the top of the blade actuating ring here can come off. That is probably sticky as well. I'll unhook its spring, lift that off. Yeah, it's a bit sticky. Blade actuating ring is sticky as it's no danger of that moving smoothly. Right, I'm going to use a pair of pliers with nice squared off ends to get those two little nuts off. I've got to back them right out, and then I can lift that off. These pliers should do it for me, I think. Yeah, I've got that one moving. That one's moving. In an ideal world you'd have a nut driver of the appropriate size to unscrew these, although of course it would have to have nice sharp edges right up to the front. Just spinning this loose with the tip of my tweezers. It's exceptionally fine, exceptionally thin in profile, the head of this. You've got almost nothing to grab on with. The blade actuating ring, will it lift out now? I think it will, yes it does. So my mechanism plate, I've got two tasks ahead of me here. First I've got to remove the remains of that paint that has come adrift. Quite probably because I squirted some solvent in there. I wasn't quite expecting that to happen. Once I've got all of that out, I'll clean the remains of it away with some solvent, probably acetone, and I'll repaint that. It's just the centerpiece in the inside here that really needs to be repainted. And where I tried to poke in from the back with my tweezers to unscrew the lens, which was doomed to failure, there was a little slight rough spot rubbed up here, and I'll just burnish that back down. Now that's all it needed, there's nothing there to speak of. Right, cleaning up time. Let me find some acetone. Alright, a little bit of acetone on a cotton bud here. Oh, that paint just disappeared. It just went back to liquid in an instant. That's fine. Now that mechanism plate's pretty sticky. Because I've got the paint off, so there'd be no harm done at this stage, I'm going to put that into a little jar of naphtha and clean it in my ultrasonic cleaner. Normally I wouldn't do that because the paint here could be disturbed and I'd lose it. I've already lost the paint. I don't need to fight with that. So in the ultrasonic cleaner, in naphtha, that'll clean out all that sticky grease It's just bunging things up. Stuff here just does not want to move freely at all. Well, I dare say that this is the cleanest this mechanism plate's been since it left the factory, or even in the factory for that matter. All the rubbish has gone off there. That's sparkling clean. As you can see, that's looks like shiny new parts. So before I build this back up, I'm going to repaint that centrepiece in there so that it's not reflective at all. And I've got some matte black paint here, so I'll just paint that in and then leave that to dry while I'm cleaning up the other components, and then hopefully I can come back and assemble the shutter.